Better get the coleslaw, y'all. Halle Berry's Bruised is going on a barbecue.
Now available in paperback and Kindle, All About Marilyn. Learn all about the struggles of a faded former teen sitcom star in this absolutely fabulous 5-star screenplay. Get All About Marilyn in paperback and Kindle on Amazon.com today. I got a chance to take a look at Halle Berry's directorial debut, Bruised, on Netflix. And after watching this film, I felt like I went 10 rounds with Mike Tyson because this film is that painful. If Tyler Perry got a hold of Sylvester Stallone's Oscar winning script for Rocky, this would be the finished result. Your Halle Berry in her directorial debut shows that she really has no eye for the camera, no sense of vision, and really does not have much of a heart in her film. Now, your Halle Berry's Bruised is supposed to be the MMA version of Rocky or Darren Aronofsky's The Wrestler, but clearly your Halle Berry does not really understand how to shoot this type of story or what story elements make this kind of story really stand out. And this film has a really weak screenplay, which exacerbates many of the problems as related to this film's overall story, which really does not really give you a sense of wanting to care about anyone or anything. In fact, you just feel extremely indifferent to the whole experience. And that's the biggest problem with Bruised. It does not answer the critical question, why should we care? That's a question every screenwriter needs to answer before they put fingers to the keyboard. And sadly, the screenwriter here does not really make me care about this MMA fighter, Jackie Justice, who at the point where she was about to win as related to a championship, decided to get scared and then panic and start crawling out of the cage. And after crawling out of the cage, she winds up falling out of the UFC and then falls into a state of extreme poverty that just seems so over the top that it feels like your Halle Berry is out here trying desperately to try to get the attention of the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences by trying to show us this downtrodden, broken woman, and in an effort to try to get them to see how Oscar worthy she was. So this film really, it feels like one big piece of Oscar bait, trying to show us the most miserable, poor, and downtrodden black woman that they've ever seen in their lives, and trying to get these people in Hollywood to empathize with this character who has no real heart or soul, the same way Rocky Balboa had in Rocky, and the same way that Randy the Ram Robinson had heart in The Wrestler. No, what made Rocky work was the fact that Rocky was always believing in himself, and Rocky's heart and passion were the thing that drove him in spite of all the criticism he received and all the people telling him to give up. And that's why that film became a phenomenon, because we believed in Rocky because Rocky believed in himself. And no matter how many times you knocked your Rocky Balboa down, Rocky always pushed himself up. And his mission was not to win the fight, it was to go the 15 rounds and show the world that he was not a loser, and it was his heart that made him a winner. That's why Rocky is an American masterpiece. And when you look at Darren Aronofsky's The Wrestler, what made us connect to Randy the Ram Robinson, the faded wrestler in The Wrestler, was the fact that here was a story about a man whose only connection to people was in the world of wrestling. And that was the thing that connected us to Randy the Ram Robinson, because Randy didn't have a life outside of wrestling. And when you looked at him trying to build that life outside of the wrestling ring, that's what made us really empathize with him, because the only place where he felt like he was a human being was inside that wrestling ring. But when we look at Halle Berry's Bruised, it doesn't have any of that substance. All it does is give us the flash of poverty porn that people like Lee Daniels and Tyler Perry go out here and make, showing us some miserable black person who is suffering and trying to go out here and tug the heartstrings of your white leftists out in California, and not trying to resonate with viewers all across the country. Now, after her running out on her big fight, your Jackie Justice has fallen into poverty in Newark, New Jersey, and was a maid cleaning up houses. And again, I find that really hard to believe as related to your failed MMA fighters. And then they also show us her with her Hispanic manager, and she's living with him, and he's really frustrated because he was looking at getting a big payday from a Jackie Justice, to the point where he dropped all of his fighters to manage her, and then she has just turned out and made him to be a complete failure as well. And that's where I start to see plot holes as related to this story, because this guy, you think he would have got, after seeing her fail like this, would have gone out here and tried to find some more fighters to go and get. And what's a big plot hole is that he's trying to talk about how he's standing by this woman, and then he goes out here and takes her to a underground cage fight where they showcase this fighter called the Werewolf. And as they're watching the Werewolf and Jackie Justice get into it, and your Jackie Justice supposedly beats this masculine-looking woman called the Werewolf, and we're supposed to believe that Jackie Justice still has it as a fighter. And that's what leads to another story point where they run into this black man who's the manager and promoter, and he offers to go out here and help your Jackie Justice. It feels in some ways like the story is not really as organic as the story of The Wrestler or Rocky. It just feels like things are coming together in a sort of Mary Sue type fashion, and that's another problem I have with your Bruised. Everything just conveniently just shows up out of nowhere, and your character of Jackie Justice never has to really persevere in any way, shape, or form, or overcome any sort of obstacles as related to anything, because things just conveniently happen for her. And many of the things that show us, how bad her life is, they just feel like they're just thrown on to just try to make us sympathize with this character. All of a sudden, after she beats the Werewolf, all of a sudden, her estranged husband or boyfriend, baby daddy, dies by killing himself. And then all of a sudden, her son is now on her doorstep after being brought to the grandmother, and then the grandmother, which is Jackie Justice's mother, and then brings her to him. And that's meant to show us, more, again, poverty porn story points like, the downtrodden black woman, the bitter black mama, and show us more story points, again, meant to try to sympathize with members of the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences in a desperate attempt to try to pander to them, trying to get their attention. So now we've got this boy who cannot supposedly talk because of trauma as related to the suicide of his father. And that's where I, again, have issues with this story, because it feels like you're piling all of this stuff on in an effort to try to make me sympathize with this character, instead of trying to let me connect, with this character the way a writer who knows their story would do. Now, that's another big problem with Bruised, is it tells us about Jackie Justice and her problems, and doesn't show us how your Jackie Justice is going to encounter these problems or overcome them. Everything is about making Jackie Justice this big-time victim, but how is she a victim if she climbed out of the ring of her big fight? That's a critical question that the screenwriter here did not really ask, and they try to answer it, but the way they try to answer it is about trying to show us how much of a victim a Jackie Justice is. And that really doesn't wash with me as related to storytelling, because there's only so much victimization you can put into a story before it just becomes really tired. But you're bruised, it tries to overload us on victimization, and it gets to the point where it becomes annoying. Everybody is piling up poor Jackie Justice, but Jackie never wants to go out here and get justice for herself, and never wants to ever take responsibility for her actions in any way, shape, or form. It's almost like that movie Proud Mary I watched about 10 minutes of, where all we saw was Mary going out here doing stuff, but Mary trying to say, oh, I'm a strong woman, but never wanting to take responsibility for any of her actions in any way, shape, or form. Now, as things go on in this movie, your Jackie Justice meets with a lesbian trainer and starts training for fights. And as that goes on, we see her heterosexual relationships start to deteriorate. So the first relationship that deteriorates is the one between her manager, and that leads to her winding up leaving him. And then we get a big explosion between Jackie and her mother, and that leads to the revelation that your Jackie Justice has been abused sexually. And again, it just doesn't feel organic. It just feels so compounded on to make Jackie Justice into the ultimate victim. And she's never at fault for anything. Everything is somebody else's fault. And they're trying to make it like a metaphor for being bruised and battered, but it just doesn't come across because of the inept screenplay and the really poor camera work and cinematography in this film. And that everything, as the movie continues to go on, everybody heterosexual is presented bad, and that really made me think about Alice Walker's The Color Purple. So basically, what we have with your Jackie Justice is she's supposed to be Rocky, but she comes across like a light-skinned Sealy, and everybody is using her as a punching bag. And it's like they're trying to make every heterosexual person into a villain in this movie, and especially the heterosexual men. And what they want to say is that everybody was using poor Jackie, but they never talk about Jackie having to take any responsibility for herself. And that was another thing that really I had an issue with this film. Jackie never has to take responsibility, but she's supposed to be this strong woman, and she's supposed to be rising to the top so that she could take on this fighter in this championship bout. But if you ran out of the ring on your fight, then how can you get a championship bout? Now, they try to say that, oh, this guy did this to fix the fight so that he could have some money to draw on, and wanted her to only go 3 rounds. But I really don't believe that, because it's just not, it doesn't come across as organic that they would go out here and have a fighter that practically fell apart come into their ring because they couldn't trust that fighter at all. It just doesn't feel organic. Again, it feels very Mary Sue-ish, and the whole story really, it tries again so desperately and so hard to be like Rocky, but it is clear to me that the writer of the screenplay did not understand the whole concept of Rocky. And the whole concept of Rocky is Rocky believed in himself, but Jackie never believes in herself. No, her trainer believes in her, and as they're starting their lesbian relationship, and that's supposed to be the thing that motivates her, but that's not a motivation that gives the film any heart, because this film has absolutely no soul and no heart whatsoever. It just feels very flat and very bland. And again, the camera work, just, I've seen this kind of bad shot framing from people like Tyler Perry, and I've seen this kind of really bad lighting from Tyler Perry and Lee Daniels, and it does not really evoke a dark mood in the film the way Aronofsky did in The Wrestler. Now, The Wrestler was a very well done film. And when you look at Darren Aronofsky's shots, they are all about showing Randy's two worlds. They are about showing his wrestling world being bright and filled with energy, but then showing how this 50-year-old man was really alone in the world and how he had no connection to anybody outside of that ring. And that was a powerful contrast that really made the wrestler resonate with people, because wrestlers are these larger than life superstars who we think are living these big time lives, but Randy's personal life was in complete shambles. He had been alienated from his daughter and his ex-wife, and he was basically alone and so detached from people that when you see the scene where he calls the kid Adam to go play Nintendo with him, you don't really think about it when he says, oh, he's got a Nintendo Entertainment System from the 1980s, and it's 2008 at the time, or 2009, and video games had changed and evolved, that little kid would look at that video game from the Nintendo Entertainment System era and see it as obsolete. And that's the kind of power that great filmmaking does. It shows you this person's life and shows us those little things that show that this person is in a certain state. And again, Randy the Ram, you could relate to Randy and his life, but with Jackie Justice, you just see so much losing and so much failure that it becomes practically her being this hapless perpetual victim, and you never get to connect with her as a person. She just is so one-dimensional that there's nothing really there as related to her character, and the way her character develops really does not give you a solid character transformation arc where we see a person growing and changing. Now, over the course of her getting into this fight, we don't see her being like Rocky, getting to the point where he's just practically the one pushing himself and never giving up, even though everybody wants him to throw in the towel. He stays and goes the distance. Now, the ending tries to be like Rocky, but it just doesn't have that same heart. And it's really sad because you have your Halle Berry trying to go out here and direct a movie that she really should have sat down and did more research on. I mean, if you're going to talk about a story of a fighter with heart, you need to go out here and watch Rocky. You need to go out here and watch Darren Aronofsky's The Wrestler. And if you're going to write characters that are downtrodden, you can't make them hapless perpetual victims. No, part of that character transformation arc is that character taking responsibility for their situation and going out here and looking to move themselves forward and not have other characters do things for them. They have to come to the conclusion that they need to do themselves. Now, your Halle Berry has a lot to learn about things like cinematography, and she has to learn a lot more about the motivations of characters, because I didn't really see it in this story. This story really was not really solid, and the writing really hampered the really bad shots, and there was a whole lot of problems with this movie. Now, I look at this movie, again, it just showed that Halle Berry needs to stay in front of the camera instead of going behind it, because she needs to take a little bit more time to get some seasoning on things like short films and learn how to work a camera effectively to tell a story. Now, I wish your Halle Berry would have gone to Sally Richardson Whitfield and asked for some pointers on how to frame shots and how to get good motivation out of actors, because your Sally Richardson Whitfield is looking like she's going to become one of the great directors, especially based on what I saw in that fourth episode of Luke Cage, where your Cage took on Bushmaster. That film, that one episode was absolutely fantastic and some of Sally's best visual work. And it showed that she knew how to use her camera. She knew how to get the best shots to show the frames that will allow us to see the action and that conveys it in the right way. And she also knew how to motivate her actors to get the best performances out of them. That one episode of Luke Cage where Cage took on Bushmaster had powerful visuals, great performances, and your Halle, being a first-time filmmaker, she needs to go to Sally Richardson Whitfield and learn what she did to make a great episode of Luke Cage and learn how to make some great shots. If you want to see, again, great filmmaking, go see that episode of Cage because it's 10 times better than all of Bruised. And your Halle Berry needs to learn a lot more about filmmaking, and she needs to learn more about how to tell a good story because people are tired of seeing her playing these miserable, downtrodden characters who are absolute losers because these kinds of losers are not people we can identify and relate to. No, this is all part of the same failed model that Lee Daniels and Tyler Perry try to push with these Debbie Downer type stories, and people can see through this type of Oscar bait where you're going to show me this miserable person whose life is so hard and how rough things are, and that kind of gets real tedious to watch because you look at this kind of film and you don't see anybody that you can care about because this kind of character, because they are so one-dimensional, they are not a person we can connect with, and all they are is just somebody there to be that victim until people pull them out of things. But that's not what great storytelling is about. No, great storytelling shows us characters who go out here and look at the state of their lives and then work towards overcoming those obstacles and becoming a hero that we can relate to. And I could not relate to Jackie Justice because she's just very boring, and sadly Halle Berry's performance is just very uninspired and very flat, and everybody else's performance is cartoonish and over the top, very similar to your Tyler Perry movies. And I was wondering if they were going to call this Medea's Big MMA Fight because this film has no punch at all and has no impact that would bruise anyone except if you tried to sit down and watch this film all the way through, where all you get is pushed with many misandristic undertones and misandristic themes, many anti-man themes, and all that they're pushing is the whole idea that heterosexual people are evil. That's another theme of this film, and it's not something that really connects with me as related to a film. So I wanted to see this film hopefully show that Halle Berry has some promise as a filmmaker, but it shows me that she needs a lot more seasoning, and she should have worked on short films, but she wanted to get out here and get into the spotlight. But when she gets on the spotlight, she just shows how she really does not understand the story of the fated person and what they have to do to overcome those obstacles. That was something I wrote about as related to women with All About Marilyn, and I don't see any of the right elements in this story to make it work. So when I look at Bruised, it's not a knockout, it's just a TKO of a movie. Now, if you want to see me do more movie review videos like this, you can donate to my Patreon, my PayPal, or my Cash App by clicking the links in the description box. And if you want to pick up my screenplay, All About Marilyn, and read the story of a faded former teen sitcom star from the 90s, that is inspired by shows like Saved by the Bell and California Dreams and Hang Time and City Guys, you can pick up that screenplay on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle format and see the story of a faded former teen sitcom star. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe. Now available in paperback and e-readers, E-Steam Cancel Vacation. Hell's aspiring angel takes on a social justice, social media mob looking to cancel her in this all-new E-Steam series adventure. Get E-Steam Cancel Vacation in paperback and e-readers today. Now available in paperback and Kindle, Stop Simping in Cyberspace. Learn how to avoid predatory females like Instagram models and e-girls in their virtual con games with Stop Simping in Cyberspace. Get your copy of Stop Simping in Cyberspace in paperback and Kindle today.